Hey everybody and welcome back to my channel, and welcome if you're new. My name is Declan. Thank you so much for joining me in today's video. How many of you have ever just had enough? You just want to get up, quit your job, quit school, quit whatever you're doing and just leave. Just completely just disappear. Well, in today's video I'm going to tell you about 7 people who had the exact same thought process as to just kind of get up and leave, and it ended in a bloodbath. Australia, known for its gorgeous tropical beaches, white sands, sun, and so much untouched acres of woodland you could ever wish for. Truly the best of both worlds. This makes Australia one of the biggest tourist attractions in the entire world. Over 100,000 people visit each year. Because of all these tourists, there's so many different personalities and people from different walks of life that this is an amazing place to go to try and find yourself, learn more about who you are, and it's classed as the ultimate adventure. The backpackers start at Sydney, and Sydney is known for its parties. It's known for the busy nightlife, the beach, the surfing, the drinking, the parties. Once the backpackers have done that and they get really bored of that, they want to hit nature and they head all the way up to Melbourne. Some of them actually end up linking up together because they've made friends, you know, they've bonded on something and they've decided that it's safer to stick together rather than go on this journey alone. And that's kind of what backpacking is like it's just like a free spirit, get to know more people, do your own thing, just like go with the flow kind of situations. This is what Australia was known for all the way up until 1992, and then everything changed forever. Hitchhiking is such a popular way to get about. Not sure if it's as big nowadays, but 100% in the late 80s/early 90s it was super popular. It's cheap and sometimes, if you're lucky enough, free, because people love the company, whether you're the driver or the hitchhiker. I suppose it is risky because you're getting in a car with a complete stranger, but this was a day when there wasn't social media or phones, and the only thing you really had was the radio, so your company was very much limited, so people really welcomed in strangers to their car and people happily got in. I know it might sound crazy because nowadays everything is ruled by phones and technology, but back then people actually spoke and loved it. The drive from Sydney to Melbourne is 14 hours long, and in this amount of time, depending on how many cars you did get in and out of, you will have came into contact with at least minimum 4 murderers. After 1992, hitchhiking was kind of finished because people were going missing and nobody knew who was responsible. Nobody wanted to pick anybody up in case they got the blame for something and in case that person was crazy, and vice versa. Nobody wanted to get into a car in case it was a crazy person. As you already know, the reason they were travelling up to Melbourne was for the nature, and this is where the Belanglo State National Forest was, and this was miles and miles of eucalyptus trees, plants, vegetation. It was just perfect for the nature lover. One day, 2 in-training runners were on one of their runs, and they were going through all the little trails that lace through this national park. They were cut short on their run because they made the devastating discovery of a dead body, and just 30 meters away from that dead body, another dead body. The only way to figure out who these dead bodies were was via dental records. They had been lying there for up to 5 months, so you can imagine how pretty decayed they were. The results came back and it concluded that this was a 21-year-old Caroline Clark and 22-year-old Joanne Walters. Joanne and Caroline met at a backpack hostel and they decided that they were just going to stick together. They had really hit it off straight away, became friends, and just decided that they were going to go on their journey together. When the autopsy results came back, it showed that Caroline had been shot up to 10 times. The police actually thought that she had been used as target practice. It was that bad. When the autopsy results came back for Joanne, it showed that she had been stabbed 14 times, once in the neck, 4 times in the chest, and 9 times in the back, which alone, the stabbing in the back, would have paralysed her completely. Before I go any further, I just want to say that I can't actually go into detail about how these people were murdered. 1, because I just don't think I could do that, it's horrific, and 2, YouTube actually won't allow it, it's just too gruesome to be online. The parents of Joanne flew all the way over to Australia to look for their daughter, but this was before she was discovered. Once she was discovered, they hired a forensic psychologist, a Dr. Rod Milton. Dr. Milton concluded that this had been done by someone with a very cocky attitude, someone who probably done this before. It was done so specific to these victims that he actually thought there would have been more than one killer. It was a crime that had been done with passion and such brutality that there was a huge chance that this wasn't the first of this person's victims. The whole situation screamed of someone with a personality that was very cocky, someone that thought they had power over people, could manipulate anybody that they wanted to. Bullets from the crime scene were taken to be analysed, and a little known fact about bullets is that every single one of them in the world is completely different. It's kinda like your fingerprints, not one is the same. This was in an attempt to find out which gun had fired these bullets. Now, that sounds like a crazy task, but basically, once they found out which gun it was fired from, they would locate where the bullets were manufactured, sold to, and then sold on to someone else. The investigation concluded that the gun used to kill these women was a Ruger Model 1022 rifle. This is commonly known for hunting. Once the police received this information, it was kind of pointless because there was over 55,000 of these guns in the US alone, which meant narrowing down who fired this gun with this bullet would have been so difficult. Apart from the bullets, there was really no other evidence, which meant this double murder case was put in the unsolved files drawer. It had been a year that had went by, and these murders were really not close to being solved at all. A man named Bruce Pryor, who lived close to the Balango forest, became obsessed with this case. It is all he could think about day and night, and because he lived so close, he decided that it would be a good idea to start his own investigation. So he headed out every single weekend, every day that he had free, he'd be out there searching for more bodies and clues. 9 months went past, and Bruce actually found something. It was a skull. Now, this next bit's a little bit weird because I don't really know why he done this, but he did. He ended up wrapping this skull in a jumper, so he picked it up, wrapped it in a jumper, and took it to the police, which, for someone who was obsessed with a crime scene, why would you move that from there? Like, why would you pick it up? Like, I don't get that part. That does confuse me quite a bit. But anyway, he done that and he took it straight to the police. What he didn't know, however, is that only 22 meters away from where he found that skull was another dead body. Only way to confirm the bodies once again was via dental records. It concluded that these were the remains of Deborah Everest and James Gibson, and they had been missing for 4 years. As I said before, hitchhikers tend to go to the same parties and vibe with each other and make friends fast. This is exactly what happened between James and Deborah. They had it off and decided they were going to travel up to a festival together. They had both contacted their families and said, listen, I'm going to be hitchhiking, but it's totally safe, everything's fine, I'll let you know when I'm there safe, all is well. They never made it to the festival, and none of their family, nor their friends, nor any of the other hitchhikers had ever heard from them again. James's body was found heavily mutilated. He had a total of 8 stab wounds. His heart and lungs punctured. One of the stab wounds was directly on his spine, which alone would have paralysed him immediately. Deborah had been very badly beaten. Her skull was fractured, jaw broken, her back and even her forehead was stabbed. This brought the total body count to 4. You can imagine, after 2 bodies being found and now another 2 being found in very similar details with the paralysing, the media went crazy. Over 300 police officers were out almost every single day scanning this entire forest. Now there was miles and miles of it, so it was going to take a long time. Even though they knew they had their job cut out for them, they were on the hunt for a serial killer. A little known fact about serial killers is that they love to play with the police and kind of taunt them. They get some sort of thrill out of getting away with something and then, I guess, showing their face in broad daylight. The excitement of literally getting away with murder adds to the thrill and kind of encourages serial killers to do it again. But because Bruce came forward and so openly just found this skull right there with no explanation other than being obsessed with the case, this meant that he was the #1 suspect. The only thing that could possibly save him at this point was this random call the police got from a man named Alex Milat. He stated that he seen 2 girls tied up in the back of a car driving into the forest, but this made no sense because 1, how did you know they were tied up? Like, if you couldn't really see them very well, how did you know that? And 2, why didn't you immediately call? If you thought someone was being abducted, you would be like, oh my god, I need to report this like immediately. Why didn't he do that? Alex grew up in a family with 14 siblings. Out of 14, 10 of them were brothers, and Alex was the eldest. The family was known to be quite tough and didn't really bother with anybody else outside the family. A lot of the siblings were in and out of juvenile behavioural facilities and known for their reputation of redneck behaviour. After that phone call Alex made, He became the #1 suspect and Bruce was let off. Because let's face it, the only thing Bruce was guilty of was being a little bit too obsessed with this case. Whereas Alex seemed a little bit more sketchy. Point blank. However, the heat was really on the police now because the body count just went up by one more. 21-year-old Simone Schmidl, I'm really sorry if I'm pronouncing that name wrong, from Germany had been missing for 4 months. Her body was discovered also in the woods. She was lying under placed vegetation and branches. All that was really visible was her boot. Simone had travelled to Australia before, so she thought, listen, it's cool, like, I know everything very well, I know my way about, so you know, you kind of gain like a certain confidence when you've been somewhere before, and the second time doesn't seem so scary. Simone had been driven half an hour into the middle of the woods. This was back country. This was like where nobody would go, and at this point she fully knew what was going to happen to her. The police said that she was stabbed up to 8 times, but they weren't sure because of how decayed her body was. She too was also stabbed in the back in the exact same place as the rest of the victims, again paralysing her. Along with the boot, they also found more clothing, but it didn't belong to Simone. Just 2 days later, another 2 bodies were found. This now meant that the total body count was now up to 7. 22-year-old Anya Habshid and her boyfriend, 21-year-old Gabor Nugabor, I'm really sorry if I'm pronouncing that name wrong, they decided to travel to Australia last minute. They had done the whole Sydney beach thing. They wanted to explore nature just like everybody else, and they headed out. They accepted a ride from a stranger to get to the Belanglo forest, and both bodies ended up in a shallow grave just 50 metres away from each other. This is so graphic, but Anya had been decapitated using a sword, and her skull was never found to this day. Gabor had been shot 6 times in the head, and just like Caroline, they thought it had been used as target practice. Because of these similarities, the police decided that there was something in this, so they decided to go back to the bullets and do a little bit more research. This was the only lead that they had actually had on this person. It was the only evidence that this person was leaving behind. The bullets that had been lodged in Gabor's skull had actually ended up eroding along with his body. This meant that the engravings that's on every single bullet was gone. And because of this, they couldn't even tell if it was the exact same gun that killed Gabor as well as Caroline. It was the same make, but remember, there's 55,000 of these guns, so it wouldn't be easy to find out who done this. When a bullet fires, it removes itself from an outer cap. It's like this wrapping, consider it like a wrapping that's around the bullet, and when it fires, it removes itself from this cap, and then the cap hits off a little bar that's inside the gun, and it leaves a distinctive mark only to that gun. So no other gun in the world would have that same marking. And then it just drops a little shell out wherever you may be. These shells were left behind, and this was what they were investigating. The deal with this is that that was going to take such a long time to go through the 55,000 and try and get these tiny little markings, because it's so small to look for, so minute, you wouldn't even be able to see it with your human eyes. It would have to be done under a microscope. But what if the killer struck again? They had no time to spare. As the body counts went up and up and up, the media got even more crazy. But the thing is, the police didn't mind. They wanted there to be a big uproar about this because it was going to spread awareness. Remember, no social media, so they were really relying on everybody watching TV. Also, this meant because the hitchhikers were from all over the world, that hopefully somebody watching would be like, oh, that's someone I know, or that was my relative and they're missing, like, oh my god, I need to get in contact and give information. You never know who would be watching. And this is exactly what happened. Someone was watching and called in. A man named Paul Onions contacted the police due to reading about this situation in the morning newspaper. Being 4 years off 30, he truly thought he knew right from wrong, safety, etc. without having his parents by his side. Going to Australia was a trip of self-discovery for him. He reached Liverpool and it was another 1,000 kilometres to Sydney, so it was like on the banking of each other, just like across the water, and he needed to get there. Once Paul reached it to Sydney, he decided to wait at a road called Hume Road. This was the road that connected Sydney all the way to Melbourne, and this was really popular, as you can imagine. All day had went past and nobody offered him a lift, and this was because, again, news was out that people were going missing, so nobody wanted to get involved in anything like that. But he struck it lucky. This one guy approached him and said, "Hello, are you looking for a ride?" And Paul responded with, "Yes, I'm going to Melbourne." The guy was like, "Great, that's where I'm heading to." How perfect, it was going all the way to Melbourne, which meant Paul didn't have to get out the car, change, get in another car, and come into contact with at least 4 murderers. Also, even though the warnings were out about accepting rides from strangers, it was a 14-hour drive, so you can imagine that walking, not an option. Paul grabs his belongings, gets up, goes with the man and gets in the car. They engage in general chit-chat and the man tells Paul his name. His name is Ivan Milat. A little while goes past and Ivan's trying to get to know Paul, so he's asking him, you know, what's your name, what's your age, where you from, what you doing in Australia, why are you going to Melbourne, etc.
Where do you live?
Oh, I get around, you know. Never know where I might pop up.
Ivan then interrupts Paul and says to him, oh, I'm sorry, but like halfway up the highway, I'm going to have to get out because the radio cuts out and I keep my tapes in the back. Paul really doesn't think anything of it. I mean, why would you, you know? They pull over, as Ivan said, and Ivan goes to get out to go get the tapes. But at the same time, Paul reaches for his door handle. Ivan then says to him, whoa, 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 what are you doing? Paul responds with, oh, I'm just getting out to go get some fresh air. It's going to be a long drive. Ivan says, there's no need to do that. I'm only going to be like a minute. So Paul just lets go of the handle and is kind of like, okay, like, no big deal. Even if I was out the car for like a minute, like, what does it matter? All of this happens in the space of like 30 seconds. So I really want you, the viewer, to put yourself in this situation right now. Imagine this is you. So you're in the car and you're told that you've not to go out. Cool. So you let go of the handle, you sit back for a second and you can hear Ivan just at the back of you and at the boot getting the tapes. Paul's eyes kind of just wander a little bit and he looks down. And right beside the pedals of the driver's seat is about 20 tapes. Now, why would someone who had that many tapes right beside their feet have to get out to go get more? Within these seconds of Paul noticing these tapes, Ivan swings open the driver's door and points a gun at him. Paul swings his door open and just runs for it. He doesn't know where he's going, but he's running. And Ivan's firing these bullets, screaming, where are you going? Where are you going? Paul's running so fast that it feels like his legs are going to fall off. Do you remember when you were younger and you ran so fast it felt like you were tripping forward? Well, that was Paul. His legs literally couldn't keep up with him and he ended up running right into a car. He didn't even ask this person if he could get a ride. He just swung open the back door, jumped in and told them to drive. Do you guys really want to know the scariest part about this? This entire situation took place just 400 meters from the Belanglo State Forest. This entire situation took place when there was only a number 4 for the body count, and Paul contacted the police, but nobody got back to him, and it was put in a file along with Alex's and over 2,000 other people's. And just like that, it was forgotten about. It reminded one of the investigators, a Dr. Basham, about where he grew up. He remembered when he was growing up, he lived in a town where there was a lot of woodland areas, and people would bring watermelons and cans and they would practice shooting. Now, that doesn't seem too crazy, but people would also practice on the animals that were there, and they wouldn't just shoot them and then be done with it, they would mutilate them. And again, if you know anything about hunting, you know people treat these poor innocent animals like they are a trophy of some sort, and these murders were done in the exact same way. It wasn't the only similarity though, it was also done by brothers from redneck style families, kind of like families that people didn't really associate with. Obviously because this was their version of enjoyment. With all of these things that were so similar, it really got Dr. Basham thinking though. The killer must have grown up with guns. He must have. He knew how to use them too well. This person would have practiced a lot. They also would have been the type of person to completely show off and act cocky with these guns. Probably have lots of pictures with them. Maybe even something that they had in common with their other siblings. Maybe their brothers. The killings were done by someone that loved manipulation and control, and there's no way that this type of behaviour could have been learned as an adult. It was something that was ingrained in them, something from their childhood. But what sort of family would you have to belong to partake in something like that? A family with a troubled past, troubled children, maybe even children that were in and out of juvenile behavioural facilities. That's what type of person. Has it finally clicked for you guys? 1 out of these 2,000 files fitted this description perfectly, and I've already told you about who this person was. If you haven't guessed yet, Alex. An investigation was launched into the 14 members of the Milat family. There were 10 brothers who shot together, who had criminal convictions. But the question is, which brother done it? Every single one of the brothers had their very own specific investigation done on them, and one brother stood out in particular. Ivan. Ivan lived in a very fancy part of Melbourne. It was very much the Desperate Housewives, Wisteria Lane type vibes. Perfectly groomed gardens, white picket fences, everybody out, the kids going down the street on their bikes and everybody on their porch swings. It was picture perfect. Ivan's neighbours said that he was one of the best guys that they had ever met. He was the type of person that you could go tap their door and ask them for sugar, milk, anything that you needed. He was always out washing his car or doing the garden, just a genuinely nice guy. However, most of Ivan's neighbours, for knowing him very well, never knew that he spent most of the 60s in prison for theft. He also had other secrets. He had had an affair with one of his brother's wives. Pretty redneck if you ask me. The wife ended up moving in with Ivan and she described him to be pretty crazy. She said that he was violent, very controlling and very, very manipulative. He would have these crazy moments of just these sporadic outbursts for nothing. There was one night where his stolen wife had made him dinner and she came through, she sat it on a glass coffee table and Ivan went, "What is this?" And before she could even respond, he stood up, picked the plate up and smashed it through this glass coffee table. Immediately, because she was controlled and very scared, she got up to clean this mess. Ivan just went ballistic at her and screamed at her and said, "You don't clean this up until I tell you that you have to clean this up." And it actually ended up just laying there, the food and everything just lay there in the living room for months because he didn't say it was okay to clean it. This crazy type of controlling and manipulative personality fit the description of this killer perfectly. To back this up, let's just say that the killer and Ivan are two separate people. For example, if you were to take the traits of Ivan and the traits of this killer and put them together, they would almost be identical because they both seek this higher authority power in life. This was one major clue. But people like this who scan every little detail tend never to miss a trick. Ivan ended up selling his car. The man who bought the car from Ivan ended up finding a bullet underneath the front seat. The guy, however, obviously panicking in case he was pulled in for questioning and assumed to be part of this, explained the situation, handed the bullet over, was very clueless about it all. The bullet was examined and it was a perfect match. But this still wasn't enough for the police to say that Ivan done it. All of the brothers were investigated to see where they were at the time of these murders. Ivan was the only one who was unaccounted for. With Ivan being the #1 suspect at this point, it was looking pretty obvious, they decided to dig even deeper just to make sure, and they discovered that Ivan had been arrested before. It's 1971 and Ivan was arrested for abducting and sexually assaulting 2 women. He tied them up, drove them out to a forest. The details were so similar to how these murders were playing out right now. Somehow, he managed to get away with that though. The entire family was interviewed again, and right at Alex and his wife's turn, just before the interview ended, they both stood up and said, "Look, we have something for you." They handed over to the police a backpack, and this backpack belonged to Simone, the 3rd person to be murdered. This was the most major clue that they had gotten so far. How did Ivan have this backpack? And then just like that, they remembered something. Paul Onions. They ended up getting in touch with Paul, and Paul described this guy as having a mustache, in his early 40s, and had a rifle style gun. This was the exact description of Ivan. Boom. Caught. But the crappy part, only for attacking Paul. None of the murders. They still had to get a little bit more evidence just to prove that this was him. I mean, they thought it, just like me and you, they thought it, but they needed a little bit more proof. Ivan's home was raided, and I'm talking it was stripped back. The things that they found must have made their heart drop all the way to their stomach. They found Simone's tent, Deborah's sleeping bag, guns, knives, and even swords. But wait, the prize of it all, hidden in the walls of his house, components for a Ruger 10-22 rifle gun. And the markings from that little piece of metal that hits those bullets' caps matched perfectly. Now they had the one piece of evidence that matched every single one of the murders. Now I've told you guys what Ivan's personality was like, and the police said that the reason that he done all these killings was because he was not in a stable relationship, which meant he had nobody to control and nobody to boss around and manipulate, so he took it out on complete strangers. He would start this by picking them up, just like Paul. He would drive them out, halfway say the radio would cut out and he would have to go and get more tapes. He would then step out the car, quickly pull a gun from under his seat, point it at them, and force them to tie each other up. If there was two, if there was one, he would just tie them up. He would then drive them out to the backcountry of Australia, the Belanglo State Forest, drive them so deep into it that they were so confused and had no idea what was going on. Then he would play some games with them, almost treating them like they didn't know they were being murdered. They knew that they were going to be shot. They knew. But he would kind of like hide in the trees and shoot them and then run and hide somewhere else and do the same. And also if there was two victims at the same time, he would stab one of them in the back to paralyze them, as I've said, and then that person wouldn't be dead, but they couldn't move at all, which meant they had to watch their friend or their loved one, their partner, be murdered right in front of them and couldn't do anything about it. This was how Ivan got his kicks in life. He loved to play games with the victims before he murdered them. Ivan Milat was convicted in 1996 of murdering all 7 victims. He has never confessed to the murders. Police are 99.9% sure that buried in that forest out there are more victims. This year, on October 27th, Ivan Milat passed away from cancer while still serving out his sentence. He has never admitted to these murders nor given any location for any other possible victims. His last and final gameplay. I really hope that you guys found this video interesting. I would love to know what you think of this case. To me, it's just so creepy and just, it scares me so much. Like, stranger danger. Immediately what I go to. If you did enjoy this video, then please remember to give it a huge thumbs up, and also if you haven't yet already, then subscribe. If you hit that little bell beside my name, you'll be notified every single time I upload. This is Weird World, and that was the story of Ivan Milat and the backpack murders. I'll hopefully see you guys in my next video. Bye.
I get around you.